Okay, S1. So welcome back to social subjects and geography, and we're looking at the Scotland unit of geography. So we're looking at a bit of graph skills, a kind of key skill in geography and in lots of other parts of different courses throughout school. So quite a useful skill for you. And your learning intentions kind of carrying on from last week about being able to make maps of Scotland's population spread or settlement spread. And we're going to make some graphs using that information today. So hopefully last week you managed to successfully make your two maps, and a lot of you have. I was really impressed with those. Some of you have used the app I gave you as well. So some key rules when you're making graphs. So the first task you've been asked to do is make a graph using this information. You'll be given some villages, some distance from different areas, and these are meant to be distances from maybe Knox, maybe thinking about Knox Academy, a number of people in each area. Let's sort of say for just for making one up, and we're going to be able to compare data. What graph would you use to make something like that? And if you're able to answer that, you can pause the video, have a think, and see what you come up with. But really, one of the key things would be a bar graph. So we can have where we live and the number of students in each area, and along the remember we've got axes on a graph along the x-axis, which is the one along the bottom. My cursor's going along. We could have the different areas. So we could have Haddington as the first bar, Gifford as the second with 7, and Pengatland with 4 pupils in the third bar. And you can see the number of pupils is on what we call the y-axis, the one that goes up in an upwards direction. Key things that I've got on my graph: I've got a title. My axes are both labelled, although you can't read this one here, but that would say village maybe, and number of students, and I've got numbers on there as well. You could sometimes label bars, people do that, but generally speaking, best practice is underneath the actual bars for your categories too. And so that's the kind of bar graph I would suggest with that. A bar graph is good for making comparison between numbers of things or people in this case. Graph 2 and 3. So these two graphs, you can compare a date against time. Okay, so that's what we're kind of doing, or data, sorry. We're comparing data against time. So we're looking at population over time and how it's changed. So we're seeing this population going from 4.76 million, or if you read the full number in 1911, 4,760,904. And by 2020, that's, as you can see, gone up to 7,794,798,739. And that's a kind of approximation of world population, and it shows how world population has changed over time. So what sort of graph do you think would be the best way to show a change over time of our population, number of people on the planet? Have a pause of the video, have a think and see what you come up with, and then press play. So what you can see here is graph 2 could look like this. This is what we know as a line graph. Okay, the line graph takes points of information. So in 1911 we had just under 4.8 million people, and we can plot those individual points and draw straight lines between those points. Okay, so on my x-axis, the one along the axis along the bottom, I have got the years. I've clearly labelled the years and I've got points. To make this a bit better, I would probably add in lines like on graph paper, so you could see where 1981 line, actually vertical line, is missing here, and it'd be easier to see. But effectively I can see on my y-axis the population, the number of people, and the numbers on the side of the axis. Interestingly, the origin, which is the place where the x and the y-axis meet in the bottom left-hand corner of the graph, is not starting at 0. And that's because there are no numbers on our information below 0. Okay, so we've taken a number lower than those numbers. We've taken 4.5 million people instead of 4.7. And that's where we started our scale, because there's no point in having information that the graph doesn't show, which is quite interesting. Another graph you could have used looks a bit more like this. Okay, and this shows a different type of scale on a graph, and it's jumping up in incremental amounts. And the lines between that show a much sort of straighter line, and it shows growth. as a trend. Okay, so that's a different way, and it demonstrates that the way that you show your scale increasing on a graph can affect how your line can change. But the key things are the same. I've got a title, I've got an x-axis which is labeled with what the actual numbers mean, the numbers that go with the x-axis, a y-axis with a population, and as we can see, a constant increase from 0. Okay, and it starts at over 1 billion here, and we've got quite high numbers sort of shooting up. Okay, what we haven't got is the units, which is quite poor practice, so we should really have units on that graph for what we're kind of measuring. But that gives you an idea of some graphs, and really if you've managed to plot a couple of graphs from today's lesson, I am happy. If I go back and have a look here, the actual document you'll get is a Google Doc, and it's just giving you the information that you need to make your graphs. Hopefully you've got some paper at home or be able to make these sort of graphs for yourself, and that is the kind of key idea. So your catchment school villages was making a graph, and it's a bar graph out of that information, and then what I'd like you to do is the population change and see if you can create that kind of line graph to show this information. And population change show how world's population has changed. So we've got Scotland's population changes from 4 million in 1911 to 2001, where we're up to 5 million. We have something called a census, which measures population every 10 years, which is why I haven't put the other census information in there just now, but to keep it a bit smaller for you. Whereas the world population is measured again in similar sort of time frames depending on countries. There's some questions for you to have a go at for superstars. So what difference do you notice between the last two graphs? Can you think of any reasons for differences? I haven't gone over everything with those graphs, so if you can think of anything, you could maybe add some of that to that information. And that is your work for this week. You are in school, you do have work that you'll have done in school as well this week, which will take a bit more time up for you. But if you've got any questions about this work, please let me know, and I can help you with that.